Before starting my speech, please POA by raising, don't interrupt by using voice or something. I easily get interrupted. So, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, remember that the goals of the NATO itself is to expand, is to like share that there's gonna be like the collective military defense. There's gonna be like the collective security that's between this country. There's 12 countries currently. And we said that in the status quo, they're trying to expand their influence to the country that's surrounding them. They're trying to share the ideology, for example, how it's gonna we become a better countries by expanding, by having a collective security, by having and gather each other and protect each other when we're having a fight, right? But this is gonna be something that really bad in the case in the status quo, because when they keep expanding, something that usually gonna be okay, but this turns out to something that very dangerous. Why is that so? When they're trying to expand the ideology, for example, the goals of the organization, this is something that's harmful because the countries are surrounding, they have their own ideology in the very first place, right? When, for example, they have the rights of defending their own ideology, they have the rights to choose whether or not they join some kind of organization. This is their right in the very beginning of the place. That is why we regret this kind of organizations. The expand motions, we regret that. Firstly, one contributions from OG. I think we have to define that. We already defined to you that continuous expansion is something that really bad, and we will explain to you our argument first. How it's going to threaten the sovereignty and the ideology of the surrounding countries. Remember, in the status quo, the problem is like between Russia and Ukraine. Remember, when in the perspective of the people around the world, they perceive that Russia is the bad guy. They perceive that Russia is attacking Ukraine or something, but they don't know that the causes behind that. They have to understand that the causes of behind that is like Russia feeling threatened because this kind of organization trying to get Russia to join there, because they're basically like standing beside each other, right? And this is something that very harmful, because if Russia in the very first place did not attack or defend themselves from the Ukraine or something, the influence will come to the country. They will try to you have to join us, otherwise we'll try to like embargo or something. We don't want to give a good relation with you, and otherwise it already push the ideology. For example, the Russia that is already exists in the first place. That is why when Russia trying to defend themselves, they're trying to attack, for example, Ukraine, it will perceive that something that Russia is gonna be the bad guy right here, right? Even though they're in the very beginning of the place, they're only trying to defend themselves, defend their ideology. This is something that very harmful. And this expansion becomes something bad because when they threaten, all of the countries like USA, they're trying to spending a lot of money on Ukraine. And these 12 countries, these kind of countries, they have the control of the media. They made it something like when Russia is become the bad guy, they made like Russia is the evil. When United States, for example, sending a lot of funds, they're sending a lot of drones, but Russia keep attacking. This is something that's harmful because when they unite, they keep trying to expand their influence of the organization. And how this implies? First case, if it's on the best case scenario where they're trying to influence the countries like Russia, like the country that be able to defend their ideology or something, I think this is gonna be also something that bad, because just like I mentioned before, even though you're be able to defend your country, you're still gonna be perceived as something that really bad. You're gonna be perceived that you're the evil guy right here, right? This is very harmful for the image of the country, for the image in the global world, global society. And what about the worst case? What about the countries that are not be able to defend themselves when this kind of organization trying to expand their influence, expand their goals? They cannot defend themselves because they know if they're trying to defend their ideology, they'll be attacked. For example, if they're trying to defend their ideology, if they're not trying to defend the ideology, the ideology, the influence from the organization will come to the country, and they'll be forced to join this organization. But when they try to defend it, they will like losing immediately because they have a lot of support from the developed country, for example, like USA, Belgium, etc. Right? How this implies? This also violates the right of the country to become the non-block country. For the country that doesn't really want to involve to the organization, they don't want to getting involved to something like this. For example, Indonesia, when they're trying to go in Indonesia or something, they're trying to get share the influence, share the goals of the organization. This is gonna be something that perceived really bad because firstly they're gonna push you like forcefully. They're gonna push you to join the organization with the words like it's gonna for our collective security. It's gonna protect our people, but it's in the end of the day, it's gonna have some kind of vested interest that's gonna be explained by my second speaker. And this is something that's really, really bad. And in the end of the day, they're gonna push to you they're gonna push the ideology, the goals of the organization. And in the end of the day, it will ruin their right to become a stay neutral. It ruins their right to become a non-block country. And that is why we're proud to stand with the countries that have their own ideology. We're proud to stand the countries just such as like, proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech. Now I'm calling upon Leader of Opposition, and POI is highly encouraged, so please do take at least one POI.
Check. In this kind of war, in this kind of era, where the war is happening now in the lots of places, we need a big security for us, especially for every single countries who are being struck or being interfered by other countries in order to those countries to survive in this kind of war. What we need to define in opening opposition is first, we want to create more peaceful in the war, by create a deterrence by using this NATO to those countries who want to join this. But secondly, we want to protect small countries who are underprivileged, the most prone in this debate, to make sure they can maintain their sovereignty at the end of the day. But before jumping to my argument, two arguments that I will bring in my speech. First, I'm going to talk about principally, and secondly, why this is going to be good for underprivileged countries for underprivileged countries in this debate. But before that, first big engagement to what OG said before regarding their idea about how this is going to be threatening the ideology of other countries. Several response. I think this is wrong because this expansion is being like a hope for the country, e.g., like Ukraine, to protect them, to maintain their ideology or their stance and whatever they want. But B, notice every single country has their right to choose what they want to choose. This is include how their ideology or whether or not they want to join the NATO. See, I think compared to what the Russia did to Ukraine, just because Ukraine don't agree with them or Russia
Russia strike or to interfere them. This is big because in international relationship we admit the sovereignty of each country.
POR.
Later, jumping to my argument first about principally, why this is this is simple. I think first the intention of NATO is to make the alliance to make the collective security. This is good because the country needs a military power to maintain their security. This can be a way for all to those countries to make a defense against the country who want to strike them in order to survive. This survive, if important, is important to them. In order for them to be free. But secondly, notice that not all countries have good ability in military to be able to defend, e.g. because they don't have enough resources to them to defend. There are two scenarios. First, they defend by their own self, but they cannot survive at the end of the day. But B, this is the most important to do, by doing alliance to the one who have power, who have power. This is important for international relationship because we supreme the idea for all those countries to be free. That's why we always stand for Palestine, for example, to be free in this era. But secondly, why this is going to be good for small countries? Talk about before, is underprivileged countries. This is simple because countries, especially for all countries who being struck by other countries, e.g. Ukraine right now, struck by Russia and Taiwan, threatening by China. This is good because first, Taiwan or Ukraine have their own ideology that they want to be free, not being interfered by this country. Why this is to be by this country. Why this is likely to be happen? Country have their own freedom. This is what I talked about before. To maintain their sovereignty, to not be managed by other country, but by other countries, right? But B, this is going to be deterrence for the peaceful of the countries. Why? Because first, when the countries joins the NATO, they have their own protector, right? It makes other countries to not be afraid or not being struck by other countries who want to invade them or to interfere them. That's why Ukraine can be interfered by Russia because this country has not been yet the alliance of NATO. Compare when the Ukraine is being like the one who has alliance with NATO. The Russia is the likelihood Russia will to do strike them or threatening them will be less likely to be happen. For all of this region, so proud to be OO.
All right, thank you to Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now I'm calling upon Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, firstly I'm going to give the rebuttals to the opening opposition side of the House. There have been talk about all of the nations should having the freedom to choose what they want. And what they say in this case is that the freedom is gone in this case. For example, in the case of the Ukraine versus Russia getting the war, all of the country, as we know, having the sovereignty to protect their own citizen. And in this case, where is the freedom when at the time they didn't want to get involved in the war as a NATO, for example, for the UK, they didn't want to involve in the war, but they have to join in the war because in this case, they have been binded by the treaty organization. And yeah, moving on to our contribution, some arguments and analysis that we are going to be bringing in this debate. Firstly, what is the characterization of all of the treaty organization, especially military one like the NATO? They do their things collectively. And why this thing is bad? Because in the first place, as we know, if one of the country get involved in the war, in which just one country that just going to feel that supposedly, it makes all of the country of the organizations should feel the burden, feel the responsibility to get involved, to getting feels like they should involved and contributing to the war. And why this thing is bad? Because this thing is making the region over there is more vulnerable to getting triggered. For example, the Ukraine that wanted to joining the NATO before that's making the war happen between the Russia and the Ukraine, in which the Russia is the country who also feels the sovereignty. They also having the sovereignty. They also feels like they should protecting their own citizen because they were getting threatened. As we know, the Ukraine is the in front of the Russia. They just the last defense against all of the NATO over there, and they as the Russia, I'm going to be getting threatened in this case. And why this thing can happen? We should know from the beginning of the NATO, in which raised after the World War II, that makes to be the balancing power of the world between the communists or maybe the East Bloc, because in the first place they have been different, they're having a different ideology, and they feels like the others as the threat to him, and they feel like as their country they have the responsibility, their sovereignty to protect their citizen. And secondly, what can happen if the NATO keep expanding? This would making in the long term can bringing us to the closer into the World War II, because as we know, the world is bringing more of the state, being more of the state, until the world is split, it just being half, 50% and 50%, and this is what making them even more sensitive, and there will be no more non-bloc country. For example, like my first speaker has been said before, there will be no country that going to be offering the center way of the solution, of giving the peace solution, of offering the place to the solution, to not being just only defending or attacking each other, but giving a way for the peaceful in the world to be happen. And thirdly, this is going to be making more of a vested interest, whereas we know as the West Bloc, it is mainly controlled by the United States. Because of why? Firstly, they were a superpower country, as we know. They were the winners of the World War. They have been a good economy. They have been best of the best economy, where all of the decision will be based on the superpower country interest. And why is this going to be bad? For example, like America and Russia and China, as we know, they're having their own war itself. America from the beginning is having a Cold War with the Russia, etc., etc. And this is what making the country in which just involved, like Ukraine, going to be the place for America to giving their interest to war on the Russia indirectly, and this is going to be more triggering the war between the West Bloc and the East Bloc, because yeah, they were making them more prone to be triggering, and they were making the region over there is more sensitive one and another. And and that's why what we think in this case is that NATO shouldn't be expanding their organization, and so this would be making a place to be a peace is going to be there in this world, and that's why we are proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for that speech. Now going forward to Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Okay, panels. I think from the entire speech that is given by the opening government, what is the most thing that really disturbed OO is when they said that country need to protect their image. But however, before we're talking about how good the country image in international stage, the main concern of country is how they can survive. So before you eventually like create your image, you need to make sure that you can stand in your own feet first for the country. And we need to remember that not all country can do such things, because the main power for any country is like military power and population, right? So when they cannot stand alone doing self-help with their own military power because they don't have enough resources, what they second choice would be like joining the other group that is bigger, so they have like sort of safety net for their own survival, right? So, but before that, some rebuttals coming to OG. So OG mentioned that with the principle of NATO collective military defense, the principle itself is already dangerous, because once you attack my member, we will attack you all together. But this is actually good, because this kind of principle could actually be the deterrence for other country who has a plan to attack other country. What happened in Ukraine is because Ukraine has not become one of the official member of NATO. Therefore, Russia eventually decided to attack Ukraine. Imagine if Ukraine is eventually like becoming the official part of NATO. This such a big war won't even happen in the first place, because Russia knows that the other member will retaliate, because no later. Will retaliate, and we need to remember that U.S. and Russia is one of the countries that has nuclear power, so there will be no such thing to eventually start a big war, because no country in this world wants to be damaged, right? Because they already faced like a damageful period during the World War, so there won't be such thing happen. And they also mentioned that NATO, for example, like they believe that not all members of NATO want to actually join the war. However, this is quite confusing, because when we talk about like these alliances, of course, all members will do everything, will make all decisions collectively, right? So before, like one of the member will not immediately like help the other country without the agreement from the other country. So there will be like sort of like collective agreement that they will all together help the such vulnerable country like Ukraine, right? And at the end, every decision is made collectively, so the practice should also be given. If someday the other member are threatened, this won't be a burden for the other member, because they know that they will be protected if they experience the same thing. And they believe that Ukraine before like involving the war with Russia, Ukraine should first like protecting the citizen. How can you protect your citizen when you know that your military power is not big enough? So therefore, it is okay for these countries to join the NATO, and because at the end of the day, they also worry about this will affect the ideology. However, we need to understand that ideology and military is sort of like we cannot really separate it, because it can like run hand in hand. But if in fact, when you want to protect your ideology, you also have to protect your territory. You also have to maintain your defense and your security in your country, right? And without those security, there's no such thing that you can be able to protect your ideology. And they believe that Western will eventually NATO is controlled by US. However, we need to remember that US is also a rational country, even though yes, we have seen in the world that US have been attacking other country. But we still have like a permanent fight where there's like check and balance given by the other country, like for example like China. So whenever like such things done by the US, there is still like the other international organization that could eventually deter this kind of concern that is given by OG. So coming from this, the arguments coming from OG is not really justified in this debate. Coming to our extension then, we are already told you that this will create a deterrence. Why deterrence is needed? Because eventually deterrence, we believe that deterrence could eventually create such a longer peace, even if 100% peace cannot be created, at least hostility or such war won't be happen. The principle of NATO is, like I said, the principle of NATO is if you attack my friend, will attack you. So this means it could deter any country that has the intention to do so. Two scenarios to justify why this is likely happen. We can take a look at what happened in Cold War, where there is like, we also know Cold War is, the other term for Cold War is a long peace. Why we also called Cold War long peace? Because the actual war is never really happened, right? It only like the ideological war between Russia, between Soviet and United States, right? So why this actual war can never happen? Because the main actors has like such nuclear, right? So this could be deterrence, and this scenario can also be applied in the concept of deterrence that we have been explaining in NATO. And second scenario, Ukraine is not part of NATO because Russia knows that Ukraine stands alone, even though like US help at the end, but eventually there's no like a legitimate burden or responsibility that has by the members at the status quo. So therefore, Ukraine is eventually abandoned by US. But if this expansion happen, if Ukraine, yes?
Do you think that Ukraine still have some kind of freedom when they get a lot of help from America because of the Russian and Ukraine war?
I think our argument is still the argument about that trend is still stands, even though your PR was like that, because at the end that Ukraine and other countries will come together to, for example, like create such collective security. And Ukraine, moving on to our argument, even though like US helped at first Ukraine, they eventually abandoned because Ukraine has not been the official part of NATO, right? Imagine if Ukraine eventually become part of the NATO, such war, such attack coming from Russia will never happen at the very first place. We believe that because yeah, and then later. And then second scenario, imagine when this vulnerable country is under NATO, it could be like, why this is likely? Because NATO members, like I said, it has nuclear, and like my question at the very beginning, who wants to be joined in such a damageful war? So we believe that long peace will happen, and eventually survival can be carried by a country, and eventually a country can protect the citizens. So we support the expansion of NATO to help the vulnerable country. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now going to the closing team. Member of the government, please welcome. For the teams, the time will be indicated by 1, tuk, and 6, tuk, and then twice is 7. So after the second tick, then you cannot do it.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is Karen Letitia, and I will be speaking as the first speaker in the opening government's bench. Now, I stand here today with a profound sense of duty to affirm the matter of the fact that this House regrets the continuous expand of NATO, and this motion should be supported and should stand. Now, we have to understand this motion. Why do we regret the expansion of NATO? I think it's important for us to understand what NATO is. Again, NATO is included by North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So North Atlantic countries will be in NATO, for example, North America and Europe. Now, I think it's very, very important for us to crucially understand. How can you guarantee that if every nation join forces in NATO, they won't cause any problems? Because since the other benches brought up Ukraine and also Russia, I think it's important for us to understand again that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. It is actually a partner country of NATO, but it cooperates, but it's not covered by security guarantee, although allies have pledged over $640 million USD, because I have read that in my experiences before. And did you know that if Ukraine is not yet a part of NATO, yet actually NATO really wants Ukraine to be inside this organization. Ukraine being attacked by Russia, Russia is a very strong country. We must understand that Russia is full of weapons that could cause a huge war. And if Ukraine decided to join NATO, how can you guarantee that NATO will always win in a war, especially against Russia? Now, before I move on, I think it's important for me to rebut what the other benches has to say. Now, the OO says that he wants to create peace and protect small countries. Well, if there is a war, let's take Israel and Palestine, for example. US is actually supporting Israel with the reason that I believe that they also want to boost their economy, but the UN didn't want to support this war because they believe that it is actually not necessary except for the US. Now, this causes the war even bigger because it does not actually create peace. Even with NATO, it does not ensure that those countries will want peace. What if they feel overpowered later? What if they feel overpowered and suddenly just cause more wars? I mean, NATO with Southern Atlantic countries, how can you guarantee that if they all join forces, they all will have the same mind? I don't think so, because they will be so powerful that it could even cause another war. Now, we agree with what the OG has to say, but I think they fail to ensure as the urgency of this matter of why we should actually not expand the use of the organization of NATO. Just because they had an in vitro during a UN meet, war would still continue. I think it's very important for us to highlight this. How can you guarantee NATO will always win in a war, especially against Russia? Because again, Russia is actually a very, very strong country. Now, if NATO agreed to defend each other against attacked by third parties, then why until now Ukraine still hasn't joined NATO? Well, actually NATO has actually said that they are welcoming Ukraine inside NATO, but Ukraine hasn't joined NATO itself, because I believe that they think that by joining NATO that they will cause more war. They will cause more war, because if Russia and NATO decided to war each other, I don't think that it will actually create peace. It will create more war, obviously. So I think that it's not crucial for us to expand NATO. It'll just cause more war. Now, now let's get into my arguments. Now, first of all, if NATO consists of North Atlantic countries and all North Atlantic countries decided to join forces, it could potentially start World War III. Why? Because again, North Atlantic countries are a part of the world. It's a big part of the world. Can you guarantee it will just cause more chaos if they expand, because countries will think that they are actually strong enough. They are strong enough to get what they want. And then if they decided to start a small chaos, it will turn into a big war, because everyone that's in NATO is supporting that country. Back to my case about Ukraine and about Israel and also Israel and Palestine. It's not going to finish everything. It's not going to make peace, but it's just going to create more war. It'll just create more chaos, because again, how can you ensure that if this country has joined NATO, possibly they're gonna think like, oh, I have so many backups in my organization. So if I decided to join, so if I decided to support it, so if I feel like this country has a problem with me, I'm just going to have a war with them because I have so many backups that I'll be able to do anything I want. So again, I don't think that it is very crucial for you to expand the organization of NATO. I mean, we are not banning this organization. We are not closing this organization. We feel like we don't need to expand it right now. I think NATO is already good itself. I don't think that we need to expand more countries because again, it could potentially start World War III, and I don't think we all want to start World War III. Again, I would like to come into my second argument that I already did mention before. How can you guarantee that if every nation joined forces in NATO wouldn't cause any problems again, wouldn't cause any chaos? Because again, it happened already. It happened between Ukraine and it happened between it happened between Ukraine and also happened between, sorry, it happened between Ukraine and also Russia. Now, okay, going to another point. Small countries forced to join a war for it to contribute. Small countries are already incapable, and NATO forces small countries to always keep contributing in terms of manpower and guns, which actually equals to more broke. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's very crucial for us to, again, therefore I stand this motion. Thank you.
I thank the member of government for that speech, calling upon member of the opposition.
Take. All right. Trigger warning. There might be a very inappropriate behavior, but this is for the debating purpose, and I'll try to minimize that. Thank you. All right, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judges, before we proceeding to our CO contributions, we would like to deliver some rebuttals. First, to the OG side. The OG stated that the causes of behind Russia feeling threatened is because NATO is expanding and try to reach Ukraine, even if Russia just want to protect itself. This also supported by the closing government side that they are concerning if this NATO is empowering Ukraine, it will be causing war, and another harm will be caused by that. We can ensure you that this won't be happen anyway. Let's take a look at the status quo itself. NATO is an intergovernmental military alliances, and their goal in here is to ensure their member security safety. Now, let's take an example. If they are only saying the harm that can be happen, like war and etc., imagine war can still be happening anyway. And if war is happening with this country sitting in neutral position in beside of both West and East blocks country, what can be happen? They can get attacked in both ways. Anyway, there is also an ethic existing in this organization, where NATO, they have an ethic. They will only defend their country's member if they are get attacked, not when they're attacking other countries. And if they are keep doing that, what can be happen? There will be no good another reason to make this justifiable. Because why? Because the world can still see this. The world can still, oh, okay, NATO is getting corrupt. We can do like something, another countries united, and we make a protest over here and that. We still have China, we still have India and other strong countries here, and we can reunite to go against these corrupt countries and etc. etc. Now, let's take a look about what CG already stated in here. CG stated that how can you guarantee that NATO will always win with a war with Russia? There have more reason to keep expanding, because the idea of NATO is to defend, not winning in our war. So we believe that these arguments are already far in their side. But proceeding before my contribution, I would like to deliver some definitions. NATO in here, they were formed to have an
intergovernmental military alliances and ensuring each countries with security system. In the past, NATO was formed due to a competition by Cold War before the Soviets fell. And why this organization is still relevant? The world has changed. War is not all about gunfight anymore. Economic war, diaspora, and other things can cause by this urban change. Government benches concern the way NATO cares so much about Ukraine and Russian war, but the reason behind of that is still justifiable and still aligned with NATO goals and purpose. But let's take a look. How can the best case scenario can still be achieved in other side of the house? First, there are two options. First, they must create a mechanism where can they protect these neutral countries, such as the example Ukraine, to ensure this country and their people if they will be safe if war happen anyways. Secondly, or opposition countries like Russia, they must propose a better proposal where they can fight with the NATO, so they can protect their member countries just like what NATO did. If war happens, so they can protect any other their member. But this cannot be happen anyway. Why? Because Russia is also have a lot of problem. Like they have a limitation on supplies, on weight, on aid, and etc. etc. In our side of the house, NATO has already proposed and ready to ensure their safety. So the country here, they can do more thing with less intimidation. At least the NATO itself, they already ensure that, no thank you, that they are already, okay, you can go to do this thing, you can expand your trademark, you can do more relation affair with other countries, and you don't have to feel intimidated because we already guarantee that you will be safe in the end of the day. And their goals to keep peace still be achieved in our side in the end of the day. Proceeding to my argument in here. The expansion of NATO is not alarming at all. Considering these things like that they have an ethic and several rules inside, making their members safe and not corrupt at the same time. But let's take a look at who is the real vulnerable actor in here. The vulnerable actor in here is the country itself, like a Ukrainian government and their society. And why can in our side of the house this can still be achieved? First thing, government argue that Russia wanted to protect themselves. In fact, the Russian government have failed to ensure that they are affiliated countries. If you think that you want to protect yourself, then you don't want your neighbor country have an affiliation with another countries. Why don't you just create an affiliation and ensuring the protection of its country? Why you force them to, no, you cannot do that, you can just dependent on me, you can just rely on me. Remember here, every country has its neutral. They can choose. And since the first place, NATO did not convince the Ukraine to join them. Ukraine with consent, with a full consent, and with intention, they are applying to join NATO. Because why? Because NATO has succeeded to offer a better things rather than Russia. Imagine if you want to create and expand more trade route and etc. But Russia said, no, you cannot do that because it can harm us and etc. And then, yeah, you're just gone by doing that. You cannot get anything. Your people asking you to be, yeah, can you do something like this? You can do something like that. Why do you relying on Russia and they didn't even help us a bit? This is very concerning. And in our side of the house, if they join this NATO, at least they are guaranteed to be safe. And they will be better in the very end of the day, yeah, sure.
Even though they are getting safe, for example, do you think that there's no like self-interest of USA, for example, if they really want to achieve like social security, why they keep using veto on the, for example, on United Nations?
Yeah, sure. I believe that your question is far away from our motion and what we are already discussing in here. You're saying that there is a NATO veto system and etc. etc. But taking note, Russia is also having the same privilege that they can do a veto in here. This is not what should not be the question you asking when we are talking about the expansion of NATO itself. Proceeding to my second argument, government in here, Judge, they are only paranoid if these countries join a NATO that they could cause a potential threat. Judges, since the very first place, NATO here is to aim to ensure and maintain security to its member, especially for those countries who still underdeveloped and protecting their people. So in our side of the house, this vulnerable actor can be still ensured they are still in the safe place, and they have no intimidation. They will not feel intimidated when this comes to a war. Thank you.
Thank you to member of the opposition. Now continue to government whip.
Ladies and gentlemen, here I am speaking as the closing government whip. Now, before I would like to move on to my particular whip, I would like to rebut to the opposition bans as well. I would like to add a few points as what the opening government has said. Now, in this case, the OO has mentioned that yes, NATO in this case creates peak security for countries to survive the war. Now, in this case, I would like to highlight again as what my first speaker has mentioned about Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine versus Russia in this case. Yes, Ukraine in this case has been invited in the NATO, and countries in this case need military power in order for them to be free. Now, in this case, NATO has not actually, NATO hasn't even actually provide proper security for Ukraine, because, ladies and gentlemen, in the status quo you can see that the war in this case of Ukraine and Russia is still happening, and Ukraine is still suffering. And as what my first speaker has mentioned, that Ukraine in this case has not even joined NATO. And again, I would like to say that here they mentioned the expansion brings hope, and it actually helps Ukraine in maintaining ideology. But has that happened in this side of the house, ladies and gentlemen? Status quo is actually expansion happens in this case, but it does not solve the problem. Again, in this case, Ukraine would always need to be dependent and therefore needs NATO. They actually keeps glorifying that yes, NATO in this case is always important because they provide security and whatnot, but can they not see the bigger picture here that Ukraine is actually currently fighting Russia, one of the biggest, in fact actually the biggest country that has military defenses whatnot. And can you actually ensure that even of the NATO countries here are actually ganging up together in one organization, can you actually guarantee that they could defeat Russia as one biggest country in a whole, ladies and gentlemen? Now, again, I would like to say that again, if NATO fails to defend, NATO fails to defend and Russia keeps attacking, NATO countries again would be collapsing due to a Bayern Treaty. Again, I would like to also mention about this point about economic collapsing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here the NATO countries alliance actually have to join a war to protect one another, causing more trouble. In this case, NATO would be actually attacking a particular country if this particular country allies of them are currently being attacked. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you keep attacking one another, in this case they are getting attacked by another bigger force, how can you ensure that this particular country is actually getting protected by NATO? Now, ladies and gentlemen, also I would like to add up. Now, the country here needs to protect image, and they said that it provides space for small countries, whatnot, and NATO is made for. And in this case, ladies and gentlemen, can you see that NATO here is actually made for mutualism? And if this small country cannot provide utilities for NATO, and they would eventually be more oppressed among peers, and therefore also again economic collapse. Now, again, if they attack altogether, the opposition side of the house cannot even ensure winning in this part of winning the war against Russia. Now, again, I would like to highlight that even if Ukraine joins NATO, it would end up as a US versus Russia war, and again, US using Ukraine as their mast. And the war here again drains economy, not for US, Russia, but for all NATO alliances as well. Now, small countries here, even they join the NATO alliances, they would also be forced to join to help in aid of war. Now, in this case, they are also forced to contribute due to a treaty. Now, small countries here are already incapable, and NATO forces small countries again to always keep contributing in terms of manpower, guns, again leading to more economic collapses. And I would also like to highlight as what the CEO has mentioned. The CEO has said here in this case that NATO won't support if one of the countries attack and they will not help. Well, in reality, ladies and gentlemen, one of these countries attacks, and the countries they attack will fight back and attack them, ensuring NATO to help them. And ladies and gentlemen, how can you guarantee that they will keep helping each other, where versus itself is supporting a war in Israel and Palestine, ladies and gentlemen? And now NATO in this case did actually welcome Ukraine, but Ukraine doesn't want to join, and Ukraine said because they actually want to, Ukraine actually mentioned and actually glorified that yes, they will join NATO, but in reality in status quo, they haven't joined. Because why, ladies and gentlemen? By Ukraine actually joining more NATO forces, it will cause more war. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to highlight here, as the closing government, that judges, if you can see here, if if NATO actually drags more countries inside them and actually aids Ukraine in fighting Russia, where Russia is actually such a big force that actually cannot be defeated in this case, NATO will actually also lose more ammo, lose more particular. Lose their economic benefit, their economy, because why? They are fighting a war that cannot be won in this case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I also like to add more points that the OO has failed to highlight. Now, yes, the OG has failed to highlight, ladies and gentlemen. Now, they said, yeah, I actually agree with the points of the OG, but I would just like to add more points. They said that yes, we regret of expansion. That is true. It leaves more harm, but however, OG has failed to provide a proper mechanism. They said that yes, it makes sovereignty less, whatnot. Speaking of country has an ideology and would lose their own originality. In this case, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that by expanding NATO, the mechanism here, as you can see, that if NATO actually keeps expanding, ladies and gentlemen, it will actually create more trouble because they are fighting a war that they cannot win. Even so, that you say that you're being backed up by the US and whatnot, you cannot guarantee that you can actually win over Russia. Because again, I would like to highlight, Russia is the biggest military country in this world that you cannot actually just defeat just by gathering and circling one countries one another in NATO. And again, I would like to highlight that here, as the CG, we're saying that NATO expansion here does not lead to peace, but war, and actually has been shown in the status quo. Ladies and gentlemen, here, as we are all debating here, we actually want peace and justice for our countries. And let's say, if Ukraine was actually keep supporting by Russia, it would decide war with Russia, and again, actually creating more further chaos, which counteracts the fact of wanting peace and justice as the other budgets has won for in this case. Now, the NATO expansion here would take many funds along all the NATO alliance and not solving the bigger problem. And the solution here lies in actually the solution here, as the opposing government would actually like to propose, that the solution here lies in ceasing fire and not expanding NATO, but instead solving the problem properly in peace, such as in proper United Nations forums. And the CG here has mentioned the urgency, the solution, and has highlighted how, in this case, NATO expansion leads to more damages and brings more harm to the table. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, here I would like to say, and as the CG, we proudly propose this proposition and would not want NATO to keep expanding continuously. Thank you.
Thank you to the government whip. To close this debate, I'm calling upon the opposition whip.
Now I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Now, I would like to bring what already each team has already brought in this debate. OG state that if NATO keeps expanding, in the worst case there will be World War III. World War is a complicated matter. At the very first place, there are a lot of aspects in order to have involved in order a world war to happen. But in this case, getting a new member for the organization is not the reason. Gov, either OG and CG haven't understand that NATO is not forcing countries to join them. In this case, how can countries giving contribution at defending war if they just force you? The relation between the countries between the members will be so bad that it's gonna make tension among the members itself, so they could not help it in each other when they are defending against a threat or a war. That's why the country, the members are joining it with their own intention. So countries still have right to refuse. That way, NATO also will not start a war just because the country refuses it. They will not intimidate or even bombing the countries in this case. Just like as my first speaker already said, that NATO also have their own code, ethic code, that they will not be, that there will be a burden in their side if they just ignore the code, ethic code. Now, I would like to highlight that the CG say that how can you guarantee that NATO will always win a war with Russia? Then more reason to keep expanding, because the idea of NATO is to defending, not winning over in war. Even if NATO has chance of losing, then what about countries that didn't join NATO, that doesn't have any support from any other countries? In this case, like Ukraine, because Ukraine haven't officially become members of NATO and have a big trouble when facing a big country like Russia. No, thank you. OG also stated that inside of NATO, there are several interests that their members should pay. This is how international organizations work. The price of interest depends on each country's GDP and will be used for a purpose. Comparing the interest number to the people's safety is still worth in our side. Both government fail to explain how the problem will fix countries when war happen. Now, proceeding to my extension in here, that the benefit that NATO provides is actually better. How NATO works is to support each other when forcing any threat towards the member. However, they also have their own ethic code for a war, like my first speakers already said. They will not just starting help to the member to attack another country and start a war. Not only that, NATO also a way to reach of each member has deep relation. This kind of relation would benefit more in today's world. Why? Because even if in today's world, war is rare, it's a rare thing, but there are still economic war and diaspora. The relationship that NATO provides will have a lot of benefit in economic war. They could make trade route that works easier and more efficient towards each other of the member. This will have a lot of impact in today's world, especially when China is monopolizing the economic. So in our side, the house, the vulnerable actors that is the underdeveloped countries, these underdeveloped countries are granted with more safety. So the moment they have joined this organization, they can expand their workspace, trade routes, and maintain their export price without fear of another country's intimidation. So that the underdeveloped countries also have a way that support them when defending any threat from another country. We have to understand that NATO ideology is only circling around ensuring safety of their members and not to attacking other countries. Thus being said, if they want to do corruptive things for attacking other countries first, like it won't be happen. Why? Because there are an ethic where NATO will only help member countries where they get attacked, not when they are attacking them. Even if, let's say, these things happen, the both nations can still punish them. We have a lot more countries compared to NATO members. So check and balance can still happen in our side. And also, the more reason that the government already said that Russia is the biggest military country and it cannot be defeated by just gathering a lot of countries. However, we have to understand in here that clearly NATO goals is not to defeat the Russia, but to defend each of the member when facing a threat. It's not just Russia, but any other country is also included. In this case, winning over or in a war or defeated a country will not be the main purpose of NATO doing. NATO is only provide a support to each of the member so that the member can defend themselves. Yes.
When you're attacking, when your nation or your country is being attacked, then you'll have to defend. And when you're defending, you'll be attacking that country too. So it's technically a war. Thank you.
Yeah, in our side, we have to understand that attacking and defending is two different things. In our side, that we have to understand that attacking that we mentioned is the country in the first phase are attacking first, and defending in here when they get attacked first and they have to defend and do another attack to that country, so that country will not attack, do more attacks to the country that already attacked first. In that case, the defending system will still work in our side. The NATO will support that country because of that reason, because there is a country that attacked the member first, not the member attack the other country first. I think that is the main reason why we still believe that NATO can keep expanding towards another country. I think that is all from me. Thank you.
All right, I thank the opposition whip for that speech. Now that's the end of NOVICE quarterfinal of NUDC 2024. Thank you to all the teams. You may go back to UTCC and wait for the result to be announced later. Thank you.